Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It's Monday, the 27th of January in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, Trump and Starmer talk trade as the US president uses Colombia as a test case for his use of tariffs.
4 weeks before Germany's election, the campaign shifts onto contentious terrain over migration, and Musk wades in again.
Plus, as a Chinese artificial intelligence startup rocks global tech stocks, a French AI champion keeps European hopes alive for its place in the industry.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
Keir Starmer and Donald Trump have discussed trade and the Middle East in their first conversation since Trump re-entered office. While the US and UK are historically close allies, Trump's policy agenda puts him at odds with the British government in several areas. With more, here's Bloomberg's James Woolcock.
The White House say the two leaders discussed how both countries can promote a fair bilateral economic relationship. Before the call, Trump told reporters on Air Force One that he believes Starmer had done a very good job during his first months in office, and that while the two leaders have different political outlooks, they had a very good relationship. In Britain, there's hope the US trade surplus with the UK could spare it from the worst of Trump's protectionist instincts. But the Labour leader will have to tread a fine line as he balances the competing interests of both the EU and the US. During the call, Starmer and Trump agreed to meet soon, with the Prime Minister expected to visit Washington in the coming weeks. In London, James Woolcock, Bloomberg Radio.
Donald Trump will hold off on imposing tariffs and sanctions on Colombia after reaching a deal on the return of migrants. According to the White House, Colombia has agreed to accept all of its citizens deported from the United States. The deal comes after Trump threatened to impose a 25% tariff on all Colombian goods imported into America for refusing to allow 2 military planes carrying deported migrants to land. Bloomberg's Bill Ferry says the event confirms the role of tariffs in Trump's policy toolbox.
The U.S. is Colombia's biggest export trading partner. It had very little leverage in this fight, and it also gave President Donald Trump an opportunity to showcase that his threats were not just bluff, that he will institute tariffs on very short notice for almost whatever reason he deems fit. So this has resolved already within a matter of just hours. The White House announcing that Colombia backed down, and Colombia's president, in fact, reposted the White House press secretary's statement on social media. So a very quick turnaround, but also a warning for other countries out there if they cross this administration.
Our senior editor Bill Ferry speaking there as the news left a cloud over global markets even after the decision was reversed as the dollar strengthened against most of its peers.
Business activity in British firms has slumped to its lowest level since February 2021, according to new research. Bloomberg's Tiwa Adebayo has the details.
UK businesses are facing slowing demand and rising profit warnings. That's according to two separate reports from the Confederation of British Industry and EY Parthenon, which say both trends are at their worst level since the pandemic. Despite government ambitions to go further and faster on growth, private sector activity fell again in the 3 months to January, say the CBI. And 1 in 5 companies have struggled to meet their financial goals, issuing warnings, a ratio only exceeded during the COVID lockdown and after the bursting of the dot-com bubble. The figures are the latest in a raft of weak economic data, which will make sobering reading for Labour ministers hoping to boost economic expansion. In London, Tiwa Adebayo, Bloomberg Radio.
The Eurozone's lacklustre growth is likely to keep the ECB on a rate-cutting path. Data due out on Thursday will likely show GDP grew just 0.1% in the fourth quarter of 2024, according to a Bloomberg poll. That's down from 0.4% in the previous quarter. Speaking during the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, the bank's president, Christine Lagarde, said that action is needed to spur growth.
We need banking union, we need capital market union, we need to keep the talent at home, we need to keep the savings at home, and maybe it's also time to import a few of the talents that would be disenchanted for one reason or the other from another side of the sea.
Christine Lagarde speaking there. The news comes as uncertainty related to the return of Donald Trump as US president casts a shadow over firms and households. Members of the ECB's Governing Council have recently firmed up market bets that at least 2 more consecutive cuts in the deposit rate will materialise this week and then in March.
Thousands of people in Germany have taken part in protests over the weekend against the far-right AfD party and a proposed crackdown on migration from the Christian Democratic frontrunner for Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Merz's plans, due to be discussed in Parliament this week, include permanent border checks and expedited deportations. Meanwhile, the Tesla CEO, Elon Musk, stepped up his support for the far-right group during a virtual appearance at an AfD rally in Halle.
It's frankly, too much of a focus on past guilt, and we need to move beyond that. Children should not be guilty of the sins of their parents, or even let alone their parents, their great-grandparents, maybe even.
That was Elon Musk there. The Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said on X that the message heard during the event was all too familiar and ominous, adding that it took place just hours before the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz.
Now to China. Chinese startup DeepSeek is building competitive artificial intelligence models for a fraction of the cost of its US rivals. The company's AI assistant is now top of the iPhone download charts, despite being hobbled by sanctions. Capital.com's senior market analyst Carl Rodder says that it raises questions about the market narrative around US tech dominance.
If anyone's on a sort of group chat with equity investors or any kind of equity strategist, phones are running hot, effectively talking about, well, what is this product? How have they achieved these outcomes? And what does this mean for the AI investment boom in the United States? It raises concerns about overinvestment in artificial intelligence. It raises concerns that perhaps the United States might have the competitive advantage that it has over the rest of the world. It raises concerns that chip demand won't be as great going forward either, and companies like Nvidia are overvalued.
For Rodder, DeepSeek's success might even make the Trump administration revisit tariffs. Nasdaq 100 futures tumbled as much as 1.9% on the news, and the Hang Seng Tech Index climbed by a similar amount.
China's factory activity has unexpectedly contracted, and the latest sign of weak domestic demand, the January manufacturing PMI, came in at a near 6-month low of 49.1. Economists say the slowdown is a sign that stronger fiscal stimulus is needed to boost the economy.
Now, the Kansas City Chiefs have a chance to become the first team in history to win 3 Super Bowls in a row after beating the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship game. Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce combined to help deliver a result which also saw Mahomes run through the Buffalo defence for 2 of the scores. Here's one of those, brought to you by NFL's 96.5 The Fan.
First down play. Mahomes keeps it on an RPO at the 5. Gets a lead block. He goes into the end zone near side. Touchdown! Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes, a 16-yard run. His second rushing touchdown of the game.
Mahomes' Chiefs will play the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl final. They beat the Washington Commanders 55-23 in the NFC Conference Championship game.
Those are your top stories on the markets. Nasdaq futures have plunged on that news around the popularity of DeepSeek, the Chinese AI startup. So down 2.3% this morning. S&P E-mini futures are down by 1.2%. Contrast that position we've seen in Asian technology shares. The Hang Seng Tech Index is up by 1.5%. The Hang Seng itself up by 1%. On the currency markets, Bloomberg dollar spot index 0.3 higher. The pound's trading at 104.60, and the euro's trading at 104.60. The pound at 124.50 this morning.
In a moment, we will bring you more on how Donald Trump's presidency is affecting the European political landscape, and also the startup CEO who's key to the success of Europe's leading AI firm. So we have an eye firmly on the future of artificial intelligence. But then I was reading this morning on the Bloomberg terminal, one of our colleagues, Austin Carr, has been writing about the case for keeping discontinued apps on your phone. I didn't realise this was a thing, but Austin Carr's got a load of them. Half of them I've never heard of. but he wrote in Bloomberg's Weekend Edition in a hilarious and rather nostalgic way. It was pretty charming.
It is. He talks about the likes of Flappy Bird. I don't know if you remember the huge sort of cult popularity of that particular app, which, by the way, is apparently getting a relaunch this year, which could be something that's very exciting as well. But, you know, the 2025 equivalent of hanging on to CDs, maybe.
Ghost apps is what he calls them. Yeah, I really like that story. He's thinking about, all sorts of old apps that he's kept.
It just makes you think, like, I don't want to scroll through what's left on my phone that's kind of been there for years that I've never opened.
They don't work, so it's just a widget, basically, that sits on your phone.
You see the icon and gives you a rush of nostalgia. Yeah. Right, that's one of the pieces we've been reading this morning. Let's get you more, though, on our top story this morning. This is to do with how European leaders are figuring out how to react to the first week of Donald Trump's presidency. Keir Starmer's had his first phone call with the new president. Meanwhile, in Germany's election campaign also heating up. Tens of thousands of people taking part in marches over the weekend to protest against the far-right AfD party, and Elon Musk making a virtual appearance at an AfD rally. Our correspondent Oliver Crook is in Berlin for us this morning. Oliver, Elon Musk has been very vocal in his support for the AfD for some time now. What did he have to say at this rally, and how important is his support to the party?
Yeah, I think these are interesting questions, Stephen. I mean, listen, he's been sort of very focused on the AfD for well over a month now and really sort of wading into German politics, and something that was seen as really quite unexpected to hear sort of Elon Musk sort of weighing in very sort of explicitly on the future of politics within Germany. And it seemed to a certain extent that this was going to be sort of restricted to the sort of economic policies of the AfD, or at least a large part focused on that, because they're a sort of very libertarian, very anti-regulation party. And that is something that obviously Elon Musk is very aligned with. And he also, makes the argument, and is what he was saying over the weekend, about more self-determination in Germany for the countries of Europe, much less in Brussels. A lot of Brussels bashing, bureaucrat bashing, that sort of thing. But it's clearly not just that. He wades into this sort of idea that sort of multiculturalism dilutes everything and is a sort of failed experiment. And then he goes further in saying that, that basically there is too much focus on past guilt in Germany, that people need to move beyond that children should not be guilty of the sins of their parents, let alone their great-grandparents, right? And this comes in the context, obviously, of, the atrocities of the Second World War. For many people in Germany, that's a very, very sensitive topic that needs to be treated very explicitly and very clearly. And you see that by these sort of tens of thousands, if not 100,000 people that were just outside of our office here in front of the Brandenburg Gate over the weekend. And it comes again with these sort of weird digressions in the last conversation he had with the AfD leader, where he was saying that Hitler was not really from the far right, but was actually a far leftist sort of communist. And these sorts of things just sort of add up as time goes on, particularly for the AfD, where in Germany you understand that though not everybody in the party has these sort of sympathies, there are certainly chapters within it that are designated in the German government to say that are basically, there are Nazi sympathizers within them. Again, coming at a time with the celebration of just sort of the liberation of Auschwitz today in Poland, all of this stuff sort of comes to the fore. As far as how it changes things politically in Germany, the polls are really sort of stuck with the CDU leading AfD in second, and nothing has moved too much in that front.
Okay. In terms of what this means in the election, the party leading in the polls, the Conservative CDU-CSU alliance, has been accused of cozying up to the AfD in terms of proposals to crack down on migration, and the firewall that Germany has had since the Second World War against the far right, the concerns about that crumbling now.
Yeah, and you see also what's happening just across the border in Austria, and the whole sort of adage goes, if it can happen in Austria, it can happen in Germany, where you have now a far-right sort of politician that is the number one party and is probably going to become chancellor there. And this is exactly what sort of the political establishment here is looking at. The reality of the situation is that even though the AfD is unlikely to be in power and likely to sort of be even a partner in power, they have significantly changed the political discussion within Germany. And that has pushed every single party, from Scholz to the CDU to everybody, further to the right, particularly on the issue of immigration. And so now Merz wants to come forward, the leader of the CDU, with a new bill that goes very, very hard against sort of immigration. They want permanent border checks. They want to sort of expedite deportations, that sort of thing. And they're saying basically they're agnostic as to who joins and votes for this, saying that basically they would be okay with the AfD voting against it. Again, massive backlash from the political establishment. They've moved back on that, and they've added sort of wording in the legislation that would make it very hard for the AfD to support it, because they're basically trying to criticize the AfD in the legislation. That will make it more difficult to pass. And this is exactly the point that Alice Weidel, the head of the AfD, made to me when I met with her about 6 weeks ago, saying that basically there is no right alternative. There is no sort of right within the political establishment in Germany, because even if the CDU were to win, what it looks like is they're going to have to go into coalition with the center left, and that is going to sort of dampen any sort of vote to the right. So again, this is part of the debate that's going on here, and it's really accelerating and heating up, though I doubt that the firewall will necessarily crumble this election, but it's something that is going to be present certainly for the next.
Of course, the backdrop to all of this, Oliver, is the weak economic growth in Germany, but also in the wider euro area, and the risks that Donald Trump's presidency poses to European economies. What have we learned about how Europe's leaders are handling this?
Well, I think that what we've learned is they want to save as little as possible. They want to wait as much time. They're basically in wait-and-see mode. No one wants to say anything negative about Donald Trump or anything about the administration. Everyone is trying to basically right now appraise what is real and what is tactic, right? On the one hand, Greenland, for example, there were two calls over the weekend, one with Starmer, which went relatively well. It seemed positive on sort of trade, maybe making some overtures to meet in the next couple of weeks, and then one with the Danish prime minister, which by all accounts went really very poorly because Donald Trump is very focused on this idea of getting Greenland, right? I think that the main point, though, and that this is something that is unavoidable, and this is something that the European establishment really needs to figure out right now, is that whatever the U.S. is doing, it's going to be basically trickle-down policy to Europe, right? If they want to deregulate, they want to cut regulations, they want to have incentives to build companies within the United States, they want to cut taxes, corporate tax rates, that's basically the United States in some ways dictating policy to Europe, because they need to deal with these things and they need to make the environment here more competitive for their companies. Already an imperative before Trump, and now much more so.
Yeah, indeed. Or find alternatives, to find fresh avenues of business in contrast to the US is the other side of that. But Ollie, thank you so much for being with us. Our correspondent Oliver Crook is in Berlin for us. Thank you so much for your time. Now, let's talk more about artificial intelligence. The French startup Mistral represents Europe's best chance of developing an AI champion of its own. The company has positioned itself as more nimble than its competitors, developing models on a leaner staff and resources. But it's also been helped by the support of another startup's CEO. This is a story from our reporter Benoit Berthelot, who joins us now live from Paris. Good morning, Benoit. Thank you for being with us. How big an AI player is Mistral globally?
It is lesser known than, of course, the champions in the sector, OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic, Meta's Llama. You were just talking about DeepSeek from China. So there are a few players out there, but they are the only one in Europe that can still make it on the global race to design cutting-edge generative AI models. They have an approach that's a bit leaner, and they try to be cheaper than those competitors to have an advantage, but they have less funds. They still raise 600 million euros from big players like Andreessen Horowitz, etc. in the US, so they don't have only French or European backers. But they have been choosing first to target the European customers indeed, the big corporate customers in France, the banks, all these companies trying to protect their data by the EU regulation. That's been their approach. They have 100 employees, more or less, starting from Paris, opening offices in the US and trying to expand. In the US, they just opened an office in Singapore as well to expand in Asia. So they're really trying to compete with these players now. The key for them will be if they raise more money, right? Because Anthropic just raised a 60 billion valuation. OpenAI is a lot more than that. Grok AI by X as well. So they're still small compared to these players, but they are the only player left in Europe that really can compete, and they are also loaded with political challenges and hopes here in Europe.
Part of your story that you're reporting today is speaking to another key figure in Mistral's success. This is Jean-Charles Samuelien-Breuve, who's the CEO of the health insurer Alan, another tech disruptor in the insurance space in Benoit. What has been his role?
It's been a pretty important role from the start of Mistral, because right before OpenAI started, this entrepreneur, who's not well known, was trying to meet all the French AI researchers. France has been good at providing these researchers because of mathematics schools in France that are important to technology and even from the birth of AI. So he's been trying to meet with these AI researchers and trying to design some strategy for France and Europe to create an AI champion. He later met with the AI scientists who are the founders of Mistral, Arthur Mensch and his two associates, and they also it's been key to gather the funds for the startup. He's met with the investors, and he's also meeting with customers and bringing in the corporate customers for the company. So he's like an unofficial power broker for the company. He's also a co-founder and a shareholder in Mistral. But it's been interesting to see that he's been successful with the Neo Insurance. Alan, who is developing also worldwide, has a 4 billion valuation, and now he's a key player in another big French startups. So looking at him and talking to him was a way to understand how Mistral is trying to make it on the global race for AI.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? The crossover of the different entrepreneurs and their various ventures. What do you think then, from the work that you've done, Mistral's future actually looks like? Because the other issue is around the different regulatory landscape in Europe versus the US. Could this kind of potential success story be held back by EU rules?
Exactly. Lots of companies see the EU rules as a threat to their business, right? Because Europe can be really good at that regulation rather than innovation, as some sometimes say. So Mistral could be looking at this and really trying to make an AI that's really compliant with the stricter EU rules. But it's still too small of a market for them to really make it as a global champion. So they will have to look outside of France and Europe for sure and have more customers abroad. For this, they need to raise more funds because computing is really expensive. We had Arthur Mensch last week from Davos telling Bloomberg that you would need to raise more funds, also that you would be looking for an IPO someday, so really trying to stay independent. He told us that Mistral is not for sale, but clearly it's a company that's got good talents and technology, so we'll have to look in the next month, maybe years, to see if they're not acquired by a bigger company. So really the key for them will be, can they stay independent and can they stay a sustainable business and find enough customers on their own.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.